and salutations, I'm Dexter from Researcher Stripped, and in this episode we'll be discussing who goes into strip clubs. We'll be going into detail about patrons who attend the strip club alone and who are not among the regular class, since we will be covering these gentlemen in a separate episode. First, let's discuss customers who come into the clubs as a group. William Shakespeare wrote,
"All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts."
Strip clubs are stages not only for the dancers, but also for the customers. It is all a perception of who the audience is. If someone attends a club with a group, then their audience is the other members of the group, and so their actions are different than the patrons who enter the club on their own. Think of bachelor or divorce parties. The attendees expect something completely different than the majority of customers from the dancers. As these actors are performing amongst themselves, a dancer tends to be merely an object for them, part of the scenery. As the group attempts to compete among themselves, boundaries are pushed or often broken, and they might devolve into how women act at a male strip club, which the dancers often complain that sometimes their female clients bite them, scratch them, forcibly grab their penises, and pull down their G-strings without their consent. Women tend to be a bit cray-cray when it comes to strip joints. Both groups are bonding amongst themselves, and dancers should be aware of that and adjust their interactions accordingly. Now that groups are out of the way, it is time to go into the types of customers one may find at and interact at a strip club. Going into specific demographics is kind of useless, as they change with the locale of the club. A small Midwestern club will be serving a completely different demographic than an Atlanta club. And one characteristic that is the same no matter where the club is situated is that the relationship between the age and type of customer. There are exceptions to any attempt to categorize a population, just as there are unicorns that defy all explanations. But this is about generalities, not specifics, as every person is an individual. With that being said, who are the most common and diverse type of customer type? Drum roll, please.
Drum roll.
The detached lookers, or as I call them, the lurkers, at 56% of the patrons. Their primary objective in the club is to look at all that TNA, but not really interact with these beauties. They usually don't buy dances or drinks for the dancers, and if they do tip on the rare occasion that they do, they tend to caress the dancer's body while sliding that tip into the garter. Time to insert that just a tip joke here. These patrons are difficult to pick out based upon their age or how they dress, since, as stated earlier, are a diverse group. They do tend to be in the club during the evening hours and usually avoid sitting at the stage. They are there for the voyeuristic enjoyment, but seem to be slightly ashamed or polite about their looking, unlike their evil twin, the bold lookers. They are a rare breed, being about a quarter of the patrons, and tend to be among the younger of the customers. This youth might account for the fact that they tend not to follow the norms of the clubs, so they can be obnoxious as all get out. Being mostly seen on evenings and especially on weekends, they fill up the stage area, tipping small amounts to the dancers, while going in for gropes or close-ups of the dancers' charms while doing so. If regulated to another area of the club, they are often found sneaking peeks at others getting lap dances. Oftentimes, rude or clumsily flirtatious, they tend not to provide much of an income to the dancers, aside from the tips at the stage. An interesting note is that the older the bold lookers are, the more often their appearance denotes a lower socioeconomic status. Next most common are the lonely, being 1 in 10 of the customers. This is the type that I most closely associate with, being the asocial non-neckbeard that I am. These customers are looking for a dating experience. Usually in their 30s or older, they dress as if they are going on a date, well-groomed and well-dressed. Preferring less busy times and an uncrowded or quieter area of the clubs, these men prefer the time, attention, conversation, and companionship of the dancers, not the grinding and eroticism of the dances. In fact, they seem only to get dances after the dancer indicates that they will leave them in search of a more profitable customer. If they do purchase a dance, they continue on with the conversation despite the near nakedness being so up close and personal. This type of patron focuses on the dancer sitting with them. Rarely do their eyes wander to others, and in fact, they actually avoid looking at the dancer's body, preferring eye contact over eye candy. They are looking for some sort of connections, talking about themselves and interests, but also listening intently to the dancers. This may be a relief to the dancer or not, as it is more emotional labor involved than that of just giving a dance. Also, these men are rather respectful, being less handsy, and their tipping techniques usually are devoid of attempting unwanted touching by commonly just handing the money to the dancer or by placing it on the table. Another type of customer is the socially impotent at 4%. They are usually shabbily put together and are less attractive than average. They are scattered throughout the club but usually avoid the stage area. Similar to the lonely, they seek out the companionship and attention at the strip club from the dancers but are unable to hold their own in conversations. As the conversation becomes stagnant, the emotional labor involved increases for the dancer and it becomes more difficult for her to maintain any sort of counterfeit intimacy. As this devolves into silence, the socially impotent will buy dances and drinks from the dancer in an attempt to maintain any sort of connection. They usually refrain from unwanted touching. Instead of eye contact, though, they openly stare at the dancers' bodies and charms, which can be described as creepy and may be indicative of their objectification of the dancers. I mean, how would someone interact with an object? Very awkwardly, I suppose. The final type of customer we are covering are the players at 3%. Usually rather young, near the same age as the dancers, they treat the strip club as a normal nightclub, appearing at night and especially on weekends. They attempt to form, usually intimate relationships with the dancers. They are usually above average in attractiveness in comparison to the other patrons, and they attempt to use their flattery and smooth talking skills to gain the dancer's attention without parting with much money. They can tip the dancer on stage, usually in smaller denominations, and seems to move on to other dancers when they rebuff his advances, or when asked to pay for a dance. They tend to maintain close body contact and might attempt more personal touching while talking with a dancer. As mentioned earlier, we will be discussing another type of customer, the regular, or also called the sugar daddy, in an upcoming video which seems to be about 3% of the customers, and they are also the customer that spends the most money on the dancers. It seems that the socially impotent are prone to spend the most money on dancers, with the lonely probably also spending money, but only on a particular dancer that he connects with. Bold lookers will tip and grope more on stage than the detached lookers, with the players usually spending the least amount during the night's entertainment. The primary article that I've used for this episode was published in 2000, with researchers only observing the customers at 2 different clubs for a total of 25 hours over 4 months. But as of yet, there have been no other studies that I could find countering these authors' typology of strip club customers. The percentages might now or even then been different, but it does provide a rather complete picture of individual strip club patrons. When groups are present, they will be performing for each other's attentions rather than that of the dancers, which can override the individual type that they are when they are alone. There might be surveys or other research completed that gives a more detailed description of customer types, but they are probably market dependent and not publicly available, which makes them a bit useless for us. If a dancer is to quickly determine which type of customer she is interacting with, she should be able to adjust her techniques in order to maximize her time and effort while removing herself from the situations that she is not either comfortable with or which are not profitable for her. And with that, goodbye.